Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has not yet decided whether the U.S. military will join Israel's attacks on Iran, keeping the world guessing over his next move. Tensions continue to escalate as Iran's supreme leader says his nation will not surrender to anyone. The U.S. Central Bank has left its benchmark interest rate unchanged amid Trump's policy changes and tensions in the Middle East. Federal Reserve officials maintain their forecast of 2 rate cuts for the rest of the year. President Lee Jae Myung is now back in Seoul after wrapping up his trip to Canada. He will preside over a cabinet meeting where officials will review the supplementary budget plan. As Washington deliberates its role in the conflict between Israel and Iran, global attention is on unfolding developments and the potential for further escalation. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump kept the international community on edge with an ambiguous response to whether Washington would join Israel's military campaign against Iranian nuclear sites. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday local time, he said that he had yet to make a final call and he would hold off doing so for now.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Shortly afterwards, he convened a second White House Situation Room meeting in as many days to discuss the agenda with his national security advisors. The talks lasted for around an hour, and it is not yet clear what was discussed or whether any decisions were made. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he had approved plans for a potential military strike on Iran, but decided to pause, hoping Tehran might still give up its nuclear program. Earlier in the day, Trump claimed that Iran had proposed to come to the White House to begin negotiations and once again called for unconditional surrender. In response, Iran's diplomatic mission to the United Nations in New York hit back on social media by saying that no Iranian official has asked to grovel at the gates of the White House, followed by a message from Iran's supreme leader himself.
The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war, as it has stood so far, and stands firm against the imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not surrender to anyone in the face of imposition.
In the meantime, Israel downgraded its domestic security level on the assessment that Tehran's retaliatory capabilities have weakened after days of intense airstrikes. Israeli authorities have also begun operating return flights for Israeli citizens abroad, while other nations move to evacuate their own nationals from Israel. The U.S. State Department has started pulling out non-essential diplomats and is arranging evacuation flights and ships for American citizens, while China is also working to evacuate its citizens. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has kept its key rate unchanged for the 4th straight meeting in June, citing economic uncertainty stemming from Trump's tariff policy and rising inflation. Our Moon Ji-young reports.
The U.S. Federal Reserve kept its key rate unchanged for the 4th straight meeting Wednesday and lowered the country's economic growth outlook. This keeps the rate in the 4.25 to 4.5% range and marks the 4th consecutive rate freeze since Trump took office, despite pressure to make cuts.
What we're waiting for to reduce rates is to understand what will happen with really the tariff inflation. And there's a lot of uncertainty about that.
So far, inflation has remained relatively tame near the Fed's target of 2%. However, economists warn it may take months for the effects of tariff to be felt. Inflation has also seen recent upward pressure from rising oil prices driven by the conflict between Israel and Iran. However, Fed officials still foresee 2 interest rate cuts by the end of this year, the same as they projected in March. The central bank's latest quarterly projections show noticeably weaker growth, higher inflation, and slightly higher unemployment by the end of this year than it had forecast in March. For this year, Fed officials expect inflation to rise to 3%, unemployment to increase to 4.5%, and growth to slow to 1.4%. The Fed also projects GDP to grow by 1.4% in 2025, down from 1.7% projected in March.
Following growth of 2.5% last year, GDP was reported to have edged down in the first quarter, reflecting swings in net exports that were driven by businesses bringing in imports ahead of potential tariffs.
President Donald Trump has publicly criticized Powell for not cutting rates, increasing pressure on the central bank. But the Fed chairman dismissed the criticism, saying, quote, "We are in a good place." Meanwhile, this week's decision has widened the benchmark rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. at up to 2 percentage points, with the Bank of Korea slashing its key rate to 2.5% in its last meeting in May. 문지영, Arirang News.
So as we just heard, the U.S. Federal Reserve has left its key interest rate unchanged for the fourth time. For more on this, we have Professor Kim Young-jin, professor at Seogang Business School. Professor Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Morning. So the Fed has decided to hold its key interest rate steady, and this is something that was widely expected. What's behind this decision?
Right. As you mentioned, the Federal Reserve Board kept interest rate steady in a range between 4.25% to 4.5%, where it has been, since last December. This decision was expected, by the market expert. The key reasons are the expectations of higher inflation and low economic growth ahead. President Trump's tariff policy is being expected to cause serious price increase in the near future, and conflict between Israel and Iran may, push up the oil price, which will cause the economic, downturn, along with the tariff policy, as well as, the price hike in the consumer price. And these factors, directly influence the Fed decision to stay with the same interest rate.
I see. And the Fed indicated that it may cut rates twice this year. What does this imply?
Yes, they indicated two interest cut this year. Even though the Fed had decided to hold its key interest rate stay this time within this year, it may cut the key interest rate twice due to worries of the economic recession or stagflation. That's the main reason, right? And then even though they are worried about the price hike, due to the tariff policy and Israel and Iran, conflict, but still the worries about the economic recession is a little bit bigger. The numbers, may, give some hints. The Fed revised the forecast for GDP with a decrease of 0.3 percentage point from 1.7% to 1.4%. But for the core personal consumption expenditure price index, which eliminates food and energy prices, with an increase of 0.3 percentage point at 3.1%. The unemployment outlook was, raised by 0.1 percentage point higher than March, and then 0.3 percentage point, higher than the current level. It will be up to 4.5%. With this forecast, that's not very good, and it's kind of gloomy. The Fed kept its original plan for the rate cut twice in this year.
I see. And now with the interest rate freeze, what happens next? How will this affect the Bank of Korea's decision on Korea's interest rates?
Well, that's nothing much, right? The Fed key interest decision show that the Fed is in the double bind. The President Trump put pressure on, Fed Chair Jerome Powell a lot to cut the rate by 2%. But, Mr. Trump's, tariff policy may, cause big risk of serious increase in the consumer and supply price. And also Israel and Iran conflict, and still the Russia and Ukraine war not settled yet, may throw another, big threat to the price, management of the Fed. So the Fed will see what will be happening in the next before they, make a move to a rate cut next time. According to my understanding, due to this, Fed decision, BOK will keep the rate steady at the next meeting. The interest gap between the U.S. and Korea is now 2.0%, which is, largest yet. Basically, there's no room for BOK to cut the rate anymore.
Right, and how will the Fed's latest decision affect Korean businesses and investors in Korea?
Well, the interest rate gap is same, and then everybody expected what Fed decision would be. So I think the Fed latest decision won't affect Korean economy much. So it is very important to read the economic projection summary, including in the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's statement and dot plot, rather than the interest rate cut itself this time. Because, like I mentioned, it was already expected by the market, and the information is already reflected on the market activities. However, unfortunately, Jerome Powell did not say much this time. The only thing he mentioned that is the economic uncertainty decreases a little bit, but still there. The impact of tariff policy of President Trump is not yet effective. And to be effective, it'll take time. So what that means, there's nothing much we can do, and there's nothing much Fed can do, and the only thing we can do is wait and see, so that we'll see what will be happening next, and then we can move next. That's the only position Jerome Powell is taking now, and also so basically the decision of Fed. The effect of decision of the Fed will be limited to Korean economy this time.
I see. And on tariffs, how do you think the Korean government should approach trade negotiations with the United States to successfully reach a deal before the July deadline?
Well, at the G7 meeting in Canada, President Lee Jae Myung, might meet President Donald Trump. Then we may not have no reason, to delay the deadline, of July. But I think, that's fortunately he could not meet with, Mr. Trump because he went back to home. So basically, I don't think the July 8th should be the real deadline for the deal for Korea. So Korea need to negotiate with the U.S. for the deadline. We have our own situation, which will provide good reasons for delaying the talk. We also have several leverages. Korea is one of the strongest alternatives which is able to replace China in terms of global chain. China is the main target of the trade war of the United States. And we may have to also leverage all the geopolitical factors to delay the negotiation deadline so that we can have some more time to review the result of the negotiation with other countries like China and Japan, especially with China. China is not moving at all. So the U.S. has very big problem, with dealing with China. So we see the result of the negotiation with China of the United States. So probably, we may have some time as we collaborate, with the U.S. government, positively, and our U.S. government may have some, reasons to defer or delay the deadline. So we may have some time, deal with those issues as we see the result of other countries.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
President Lee Jae Myung returned to South Korea early this morning, following a 3-day trip to Canada to attend the G7 summit. Korea's Air Force One landed at Seoul Air Base in Seongnam City just after 1 a.m. President Lee and First Lady Kim Hye-kyung were welcomed by Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik and Senior Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho. Later this afternoon, the president is scheduled to preside over a cabinet meeting at the Yongsan Presidential Office. The U.S. State Department announced Wednesday that it's resuming the process for foreigners to apply for student visas. However, in the public notice, the State Department said that new applicants who refuse to set their social media accounts to public and allow them to be reviewed may be rejected. The department added that consular officers will look for posts and messages that could be deemed hostile to the U.S., its government, culture, institutions, or founding principles. Washington last month temporarily suspended the scheduling of new visas interviews for international students while preparing its social media screening process. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth said there will be a new standard for Asian and other allies' defense spending. This comes amid speculation that U.S. President Donald Trump may call for a hike in South Korea's share of defense spending. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said there will be a new standard for defense spending for Asian and other U.S. allies, as the Pentagon chief reiterated U.S. President Donald Trump's call for NATO members to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. Speaking to the Senate Armed Services Committee on Wednesday, Hegseth stressed that the U.S. cannot want the allies' security more than they do. He also said NATO heads must commit to spending 5% of GDP on defense at the NATO Heads of State meeting next week. The comments from the Pentagon chief come amid speculation that Trump might raise South Korea's defense spending or its share of the cost of stationing U.S. forces in Korea. Currently, South Korea's defense spending stands at around 2.5% of its GDP. Meanwhile, during a forum hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies on Wednesday, U.S. Senator Andy Kim said that the Korean administration's reported consideration to decrease USFK presence in South Korea is a perfect way to derail the Seoul-Washington relationship, especially at a critically important moment for the alliance. The Korean-American senator also stressed that failing to treat U.S. allies and partners differently from adversaries is a huge mistake, adding they will cause unnecessary friction. At the same forum, former Deputy Secretary of State during the Joe Biden administration, Kurt Campbell, warned that any substantial adjustments to the USFK troop level could be misinterpreted as a sign of reduced security commitment from Washington. Campbell warned that any steps that would lower the troop presence in South Korea could lead to a crisis in confidence. The Wall Street Journal last month reported that the Pentagon was considering the idea of withdrawing some 4,500 USFK troops to other locations in the Indo-Pacific to better calibrate U.S. force posture in Korea to deter China. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Cheonggyecheon is one of Seoul's most iconic urban streams that becomes a nice rest area, especially during the hot summertime. But it wasn't this welcoming or comforting 20 years ago. Our Park Gun tells us more.
With daytime temperatures soaring past 30 degrees Celsius, people in Seoul are doing all they can to stay cool, from carrying sun umbrellas to clutching icy drinks. And for many, it's the perfect weather to enjoy the water or even get right in. And there's a special place that's drawing big crowds, the upper part of Cheonggyecheon, temporarily open to the public to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the stream's restoration. Laughter echoed as children and adults splashed, kicked up water, and even waded through stronger currents for fun. International tourists were also spotted easily, cooling off and snapping photos.
Living in somewhat of a big city, you don't normally get to see really lovely streams like this, especially when it's so hot and humid. Kind of refreshing to be able to step in the water. It was a lot of fun.
But for Seoulites, Cheonggyecheon isn't just for play. It also offers a peaceful escape from the heat.
It's been so hot lately, but by the stream, it feels cool, so it's a great place to rest. I often like coming out here for some fresh air, especially as sitting all day at work feels stuffy.
That comfort is the result of a remarkable transformation that began 2 decades ago. Cheonggyecheon was once sitting under concrete during Korea's industrial boom. Restoring it raised environmental concerns, but now it's clean enough for native fish and birds to thrive. A true case of urban ecological revival. In fact, the stream is home to around 20 native fish species, including the Korean spotted barbel, which only survives in grade 2 or cleaner water. And that's thanks to regular water and bacteria tests conducted to maintain quality. Beyond ecosystem revival, the stream is widely recognized as a successful model of urban water management, offering more than just eco-friendly value.
Cheonggyecheon helps lower the surrounding temperatures raised by heat-absorbing pavement like asphalt, and even improves air quality, acting like an air conditioner for the city.
Seoul now plans to transform more than 300 kilometers of streams running through the city into vibrant, accessible waterfront parks just like Cheonggyecheon. And as the city moves toward a more water-sensitive future, Cheonggyecheon stands as a reminder that even in the heart of a big city, nature can make a peaceful comeback. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Huaiji County in China's Guangdong province is facing a once-in-a-century flooding and mass evacuations after heavy rainfall caused by Typhoon Wu-tip caused the Suijiang River to burst its banks. As of around 7 a.m. on Wednesday, the Huaiji hydrometric station recorded a peak river level at its highest ever recorded, some 5.22 meters above the warning threshold. Along the river, 7.8 kilometers of levees have been breached. Flooding has hit 19 towns, affecting around 300,000 residents, with more than 68,000 evacuated. Over half the county's roads are submerged, power and internet are down in many areas, and schools and businesses remain closed. More than 10,000 rescuers have been deployed to evacuate stranded residents. In Indonesia, dozens of flights have been cancelled or delayed after Mount Lewotobi laki-laki erupted on Tuesday. The volcano on Flores Island erupted at around 5:35 p.m. local time, sending a massive ash cloud over 10 kilometers into the sky, visible up to 150 kilometers away. Authorities have raised the alert to the highest level 4. The ash cloud prompted the cancellation and delay of flights to and from Bali's international airport. The airport in Flores also closed temporarily. Several villages near the volcano were evacuated. While no injuries have been reported, ash is falling on homes and roads and is contaminating water supplies. According to experts, ash clouds pose serious risks to jet engines and could linger depending on wind. They also cautioned about potential lava flows and mudslides if rain follows. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is facing growing criticism at home after saying on Tuesday that Israel is doing the West's dirty work by striking Iran's nuclear facilities. Speaking on the sidelines of the G7 summit, Merz praised Israel's actions as courageous, saying he has the greatest respect for its military campaign against Iran. The comments have stirred backlash among German lawmakers and human rights advocates. Critics argue Merz is normalizing targeted strikes that bypass international diplomacy and risk violating international law. However, Merz defended his stance, saying he stands by his remarks, though he declined to address criticisms directly. On Fano Island, off Denmark's southwestern coast, more than 5,000 kite enthusiasts from over 26 countries are taking part in the 40th anniversary of the island's International Kite Festival. Fano Island is uniquely positioned for the festival with its 16-kilometer length, 3-kilometer width, and reliable winds, making it ideal for kite flying. The festival runs from June 19th to 22nd, and family-friendly events, including workshops and demonstrations, will be offered.
Today marks the beginning of this summer's first monsoon rains for inland areas. Rain will begin on Jeju Island this morning, then spread to parts of southern regions this afternoon, then reaching central parts of Korea by tonight. Please be on alert as we're expecting heavy downpours in many parts of the country starting tomorrow afternoon. Until Saturday, the capital area in Gangwon-do province could see up to 120 millimeters of showers. Well, before the rain fully sets in, the heat will continue. It will be hotter today. Seoul will climb to 33 degrees Celsius. Wonju in Gangwon-do and Gyeongju both will be topping out at 34 degrees. Daegu and Daejeon will be as hot as Seoul, Gwangju getting up to 30 degrees Celsius. Monsoon rain in the central region will stop on Saturday, but it's expected to continue into early next week in the southern region. So please stay safe and prepared.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.